Hey everyone, thank you very much and welcome to the stream. Yeah, thank you all for being here. I'm starting off today with the Carocon defense, the advanced Tal variation. I wanted to go through two openings before I got to the games today, but I wanted to go through them sort of quick, if possible. But I have two good openings that people have suggested, and they are the Sicilian Dragon and the Tal variation of the advanced Carocon. In terms of my ability to cover them in the time, I'm sure that we will just be scratching the surface. But at the same time, I'm hoping that I can put a little bit of value into the analysis. Hey, Aphelion, how's it going? How's your day? But yeah, so this is the Carocon Defense Advanced Tal variation. Just to play this through from the start, I'll just reload the analysis board. E4, C6, D4, D5, and then E5, Bishop F5, H4. I haven't played this much as white. Mainline Carocon, Knight C3 is what I tend to play. But generally, yeah, this is pretty much, you know, this is an aggressive way to play it. Ideas like G4 are pretty popular for white here. Trying to push the bishop onto h7 or to d7. But basically, you know, white starts off with an extremely aggressive attack and tries to build up the, you know, the inability. It basically tries to make black unable to castle queenside, and then you know, should black castle or unable to castle kingside, and should black be unable to castle kingside, white will be ready to play queenside advance as well. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, it's an aggressive opening. Yeah, e6 makes this bishop's mobility very limited. So, like, say, for example, h4, h6, or even h4, e6, g4, bishop g6, h5. This ends up being basically being the like, it's basically like a pre-move type, you know, exploit, right? Like this, you know, basically the bishop, black is predisposed to play a quick e6, but h4 catches that pre-move and wins the bishop immediately. Obviously, something black doesn't want to have happen. But if you're in the situation where you've played this, opening anyways, h4, h6. G4, and then this is the main forking point, either bishop h7 or bishop to d7. Usually bishop to d7. This g4 pawn is somewhat vulnerable, so h5, queen c8 is playable here, but not the preferred move. You know, often black will just sort of accept the you know, restrictions on the light squared bishop, and c5 gets played, c5, and then if pawn takes c5, bishop takes c5. But c5 gets played also, and knight gets to go to c6. So we can take a look at this game. f4, c5, c3, queen b6, knight f3, knight c6. And yeah, it's an interesting game. I mean, you know, this kingside expansion is really kind of unusual for white. But at the same time, this shows a really positive eval. You know, to my eyes, basically, it looks like white is losing in development, basically winning in space. So I guess that spatial advantage is, you know, valuable. But I would figure that white is going to be in a tough position because this can be undermined by a lot of different types of moves. Hey, good morning, or how's it going, Richard? How are you? Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a few days. So knight f3, yeah, and basically, you know, white has this superior evaluation, but a very loose and difficult to handle position. With rook to h2, which is the preferred move here, either king f2 is the most popular move, rook h2 is the second most popular move. With rook h2, the bishop gets to develop to e3, which is a valuable square in terms of supporting this or d4 pawn. So this, you know, this bishop covers b2, the bishop goes to e3, the knight can go, you know, the knight can probably develop to a3, but it's a tricky situation. Well, we've been getting a lot of good use out of that Discord that you set up, Richard. So I really appreciate you doing that, and thank you very much for setting up that Discord. That's the official Discord, and it's really growing, which makes me, it basically makes me super happy. Thank you very much for setting up that Discord, Richard. I appreciate it. Yeah, so rook h2 holds b2, but let's look at a few other lines. So apart from this like bullet catch, this so on h4, g4, bishop g6, h5. Apart from this bullet catch, like what are the aspects of this position? White is basically going to make a really aggressive, aggressive push for space on the king side. Yeah, Discord is awesome, super helpful. We've been getting good use out of it with this stream. So g4, bishop d7, and black can retreat the bishop to h7. So basically, this is the key fork in this position. Sometimes black goes bishop e4, disrupting, basically disrupting the king side even further, like just making it so that these pawns are extremely, able to be attacked. The bishop goes back to h7 on h3, or on f3, but here bishop d7, h5, e6, f4, and this is the main line. So e6 is a e6 really is a restrictive move. It works a lot better with bishop to h7. So if bishop to h7, e6 becomes a lot more intuitive. But I'm kind of impressed by this this overall main line. Like in my eyes, this bishop is just so misplaced here. c5, bishop takes c5, and eventually this bishop gets to trade off for white's bishop, or to at least try to make a play on the queen side. But this overall, I'm surprised that this is such a good, this is such a popular main line for black. I would definitely play bishop h7 here. This diagonal is a big diagonal, and this bishop's not very attackable there. Then you can comfortably play e6, and then, I don't know, bishop to b4, bishop to a5, bishop to b6, and then knight to e7, and then castle would be a potential plan. But I would definitely keep the bishop outside the pawn chain. I mean, the whole point of the Caro-Kann, right, is to have the bishop on the outside of the e6 pawn chain. So if you play it back against anything, you're sort of making it, you're not playing kind of the principal element of the Caro-Kann, which is similar to the French structure, but with the bishop on the outside of the pawn chain, so it's not a problem. Here, this is really interesting. Basically, e6. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, sorry. It took me a second to realize what you were saying, Ophelia. But yeah, bishop e7, e6 looks kind of interesting. I mean, basically, this open diagonal looks pretty dangerous. But yeah, I'm sure e6 is a somewhat playable move. In fact, I think it's the preferred move here. So h4, h6, g4, bishop h7, and the preferred tactic for white in the engine analysis is e6. And it's also the most popular move in this this opening book. So interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting, Aphelion. Interesting idea. So e6, pawn takes e6, knight f3, knight e5. I think white's in pretty good shape. And yeah, good stuff. Interesting. I mean, the position that I'm the most worried about in this opening is something along the lines of like, something along the lines of this or something, where f4 happens, and basically this pawn structure looks really dangerous. This looks very dangerous to play against, right? Interesting. I've played Maxime Vacher-Lagrave in a bunch of bullet games, and he always destroyed me. Like I'm a reasonably good bullet player, but Vacher-Lagrave, I've gotten a bunch of games against him. On, I think it was ICC, but I never won one. He's a complete monster at 1 minute. Like when he plays, he basically plays 1 minute like most people play like game in 30. It's insane. He's a ridiculously good 1 minute player. I don't know if he plays much of that anymore, but at one point I got a bunch of games in against him and never won a single time. Um, yeah, he's great. He's one of the only real top players that I've had, that I've played a lot against. But I probably have a good solid like 10 or 15 games against him. I should pull one of those up. If I could find my old ICC games, maybe I'll bring one of me getting destroyed at 1 minute versus Vacher Legrave. But yeah, he's pretty impressive. Yeah, no, I think I should. I'll see if those games are still accessible, but maybe. I never won once. He probably is like 25-0 against me. He's crazy good. But yeah, so anyways, d4, e5, f4, g4, h5, and white is basically, white is better here. But at the same time, this pawn structure looks so, yeah, it would be interesting. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I have mixed feelings about like that. I mean, it would be sort of a non-lesson stream, or it might be less of a lesson stream. But I don't know. I'll see if I can find the games, and we'll see what I can do with them. Anyways, this d4, e5, f4, g4, h5 somehow leads to a plus 0.6 for white. So, really interesting. This queenside development is bad. In terms of plans, I don't really know what the sides are supposed to do here. Like bishop d3, maybe. So say queen c7, which is one of the only playable moves for white. Bishop d3, and then maybe c5. Okay, so c5 is a plan for black, followed by c3, knight c6. But I was wondering if white would get this f5 push in. That's what I was curious about here. C takes d4, c takes d4, knight b4. I mean, it's kind of tricky. I don't know, maybe rook to h3. But it's weird that the eval is so positive on this opening when the pawn structure's like that. I guess it's sort of white's overextended pawn structure versus black's poor development on the queen side. But very interesting, a very modern a modern situation. Cool. So h4, I'm just gonna play through the main line. h4, h5 is actually the main line here. So this makes g4 unplayable. And then if h4, h5, then challenge with c4, e6, knight c3. Okay, so that's the formation for white. If h4, h6, then push g4 and expect bishop to d7, and then play h5. So that's the main line there, and then e6 and f4, and have this huge kingside pawn structure against the bishop that's stuck on d7. And then just in terms of other main lines here, let's take a look at queen b6. Queen b6, knight c3, h5, knight ge2, and in this case just develop normally. So overarching point of this opening, which is pretty crazy, e4, c6, d4, d5, e5, bishop f5, h4, h6. And here, but there's a split of 3 different moves here. h5, okay, on h5 you play c4 and try to undermine this pawn center. So on e6, knight c3. On h6, you chase the bishop with g4. And the bishop usually goes to d7, but can also go to either e4 or h7. And in the h7 case, you can play h5, basically restricting this king side. One other thing, just a positional concept here, with the reason why the engine is so big on h5 here is this pawn basically controls these 2 pawns in this scenario. This pawn keeps the h6 pawn from moving forward and keeps the g pawn from moving forward as well. So here, basically, you're using 1 pawn to control 2. Otherwise, it's like the question is, why do you play h5 here? It's not that easy to. It's it's a move that requires some thinking behind it. But it's this concept, this 1 pawn versus 2, is the value of playing h5. At this point, h4 and g4 have been played, so it's not as if h5, weakens your pawn structure much. Your pawns are already very extended. So there. And then h4, h6, bishop d7, h5, bishop h7, e6 is that tactic that Aphelion was referring to. And then here, like, pawn takes is the main one, but basically this diagonal becomes super dangerous. So bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, queen to d6, and queen to g6, and then king d8. So white's in pretty big, basically white's in pretty good shape. Black's in pretty big trouble here. Moves like knight f3, knight e5, knight f7. This e6 sacrifice was definitely worth it. So this plays out well for white. On the other side, e5, h4, h6, g4, bishop d7. So h5 holds both of them. And then the third option here on h4, queen to b6. Queen to b6, you basically just sort of develop in a normal Caro-Kann type fashion. So e6, knight g3, bishop g6, bishop e2, c5, and d takes c5. And here, basically, white's in a pretty good place. Nothing, here. Black's sort of equalized, but so I guess that this is probably the best line for black. But that sort of makes sense. I mean, it's the only line that basically transposes into a normal Caro-Kann. Everything else here, white sort of creates a lot of problems for black. So here, just to go through the lines again, and then we'll move on from this opening. 5, h4. This defines advanced variation. h6, and then g, and then the mainline move is bishop to d7. On bishop to d7, you play h5, and then h5 and f4, and this crazy pawn structure, which plays white. On bishop to h7, you also play. You also basically have the h5 threat, but against the immediate bishop h7, you play e6, pawn takes e6, bishop to d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and here you have this big threat on this diagonal. I don't really think there's any way that black can stop this. I think either king to f7 is probably the best shot, but basically, that queen's going to g6 no matter what, so there's not really much that could be done. So that's the response to that. And bishop d7, we said h5, and bishop to e4, or so h4, h5, c4, play for the center, and h4, queen b6. This is the best line for black from an eval standpoint. You can play g4 here, bishop to d7, and then play normal developing moves in the Caro-Kann. But it's really pretty interesting. It's an aggressive way to play against the Caro-Kann. h4 sort of signals g4, but the move that really compromises the king side is g4. That's the move that's committal. h4, you're basically fine. h4 is played in many, relatively conservative Caro-Kanns. You might be signaling g4, but at this point, white hasn't done anything too disastrous to his pawn structure, so things are basically fine. Anyways, this continues on, and that's an overview of the main lines in that opening. Going the other direction, we wanted to take a look at the Sicilian Dragon. Honestly, the Sicilian Dragon is probably the most theoretically complicated opening, probably where the analysis has been done the most, but that's okay. We'll do it. I won't be able to do justice to it in 10 minutes, but it'll be interesting to go through. So here, pawn takes, knight takes, g6, knight c3, bishop g7. And here, basically we're in that would be a clickbaity thing to do, Jen.
And adorable.
Honestly, I'm not big on the promotion side of things. I'm just sort of trying to give free lessons, but Jen has all these ideas, so Jen's sort of keeping me on my toes with things to do in terms of ideas. Anyways, this is a pretty interesting situation. Black basically, this is considered to be the most aggressive line for Black. The defining characteristic of the dragon is G6. I mean it is. It's really pretty rough. There's not much I think to do here. E4, or sorry, I'll start a new analysis board so we won't jump into that old theory. But anyways, E4, C5, knight F3, knight C6. D4, pawn takes, knight takes, G6. Sicilian dragon, accelerated dragon. Oh man, Aphelion. Jen has been wanting me to get a cat for so long that it's not even. This is a long-standing question, but I think Jen's dad just got a cat, so. I feel like the pressure's been off, but the answer to that question, Aphelion, is I'm sure that Jen would like to have a cat here. Anyways, so G6 is the move, and you guys are funny. So G6, and then here the main line is knight C3, bishop G7. There's main move here is bishop b3. Let's just play through the main lines. Castles, bishop b3, d6, f3, bishop d7, queen d2. And here, it's a little bit diverging. There's multiple choices here. White can castle on both sides. The preferred side here is castling queenside. This makes sense. In the Sicilian Dragon, you've played g6, right? So g6, h4, h5. No, it's funny. Jen is I can't have the cat at my apartment, unfortunately. I think it might actually be against the rules, which is kind of a bummer, but anyways, Jen really wants a cat. She's wanted a cat for as long as I've known her, so so castle's queenside, and this is it's no good. So Sicilian Dragon, offers opportunities like h4, h5, knight takes h5, and potentially rook takes h5. It's one of the openings that's very aggressive. Black basically moves his rook to the c8 file, and white tries to attack on the king side. My general understanding of like the Sicilian is that white tries to, attack aggressively on the king side, and black tries to play a queen side advance. The longer the game goes on, the more favorable that it becomes to black. As a fundamental perspective, that's always what I think of. But here, I basically feel like bishop e3, and the attack can really start. So within that idea of attacking aggressively on the black king side, I think basically white can work. White can basically make that advance, and then have a solid have a solid chance of breaking open the black king side, helped by queenside castling. So queenside castling is a move that's often played in the Sicilian Dragon. Bishop c4, castles, bishop b3. On the opposing side, black often castles kingside. Almost always. That's true for most Sicilians, but in the Dragon especially, it's very rare that black will not castle kingside. I don't think there's any real main lines where in the Dragon where black doesn't castle kingside. Now all of white's pieces are focused towards the king side, and the attack can start. Knight e5 is played, but h4 is the way to go. I mean, h4 is basically the main line here. The attack is starting. Rook b1 is interesting. G4 is an interesting break. H takes, f4, knight c4. Interesting. Probably queen to e2. But black's looking like he's in pretty good shape here. So I guess in terms of the Sicilian Dragon, there's books written on this. There's many hours of grandmaster analysis spent on it. I just want to make sure that everyone knows what it is first. It's this, it's this early G6 in the Sicilian with fianchettoing shadowing of the bishop on G7. Yeah, it's got, some well-established main lines. Queen A5 is a move that's played here sometimes, followed by white castling, black castling, bishop B3. And basically, black's just trying to advance the situation on the queen side, while white tries to advance on the king side. This is a more conservative line for white. I think that in the lines where white castles king side, the threats on the king side from white tend to be less less powerful. Basically having the rook on h1 in isolation is probably very helpful. Playing something along the lines of like queen d2, queen d2 and bishop h6 is much scarier if you have h4, h5, and white having the ability to break open the king side. Yeah, no. I mean, I basically think that aggressive attacks on basically aggressive attacks on the king side are the way to go. I mean, let's go back to this main line. The main line includes h4, basically starting this this king side attack. Here, it's a pre-built strategy. Basically, it's 1,080 games start, or have h4 and the attack starting by move 12. So in this context, like, this is very well explored. These are well-known attacks that many grandmasters have played against each other. And you're just sort of trying to hope for divergence and or an inefficiency by black here as white, because the attacks are well explored. I actually completely agree with that, Aphelion. I think castling queenside in the dragon is better. Just launching, or I mean, castling queenside is good. Castling queenside is good not because it's castling queenside, but instead because it's helpful to the it's helpful to the rook on h1. It's helpful to have the rook on h1 attacking the king side, and supporting the attack that way. That's not available if castling is played instead. Anyways, king b1 is played. And then b5, black's going to be advancing on the queen side, white's going to be attacking on the king side, and basically, it's going to come down to who can make this, who can basically make the disruptive move first. White gets good chances when he plays moves like knight to d5 and the rook has to move to e8, because, in this situation, white is the attacker and black is the responder. And the moves that black is playing are not moves that are advancing him in any way. They're moves that are responsively being played, to prevent the issues for white. But anyways, this is an interesting position. Well explored attacks. A3 again is basically a protective move for white. It's really about who can make the opponent, be in a difficult situation first with their attack. Who can make their opponent waste more moves on defense is the point of the yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Aphelion. Yeah, no, that's correct. What Aphelion is saying. So we're about to wrap up this opening theory, but yeah. So yeah. Books and books have been written by grandmasters on the dragon. It's important that you know what it is and what the main concepts are. Basically, the most important thing about the Sicilian dragon playing it as white is to know that you really are free to attack on the king side, and the most powerful attacks will come after white castles queen side. You're going for a quick win as white, or the quickest win you can possibly get. And you're trying to make it so that black has to play defensively against your aggressive moves. So that's my that's my thinking. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, without theory, this can really get nuts. But the point about it is, if you know that as white you're supposed to attack on the king side and attack aggressively on the king side, that will lead you through many many questions, even with incomplete theory knowledge. The theory knowledge in the dragon, I'm sure, goes like 40 to 50 moves. I mean, it goes basically through the whole game at grandmaster level. You're not. I don't think you're going to be able to find much in the way of novelty, but it's it's kind of good to know where it's uh, where it's going, um, or that's a very solid white strategic plan. This aggressive tactical attack. Um, good question. Good question, Houseline. I guess I would say I advocate everyone play the Italian game. It's very solid. There's just not much, ability for black to trick you or to play some theoretical attack, which seems to be very common at class level. If you just play the Italian game, you'll be in a position where you will be playing, basically playing chess against your opponent. My strategy for improving was always basically, playing a solid opening where I wasn't any worse, and then becoming better tactically so that my opponents would, basically in a situation where I had to formulate a plan and execute well tactically, I would be at an advantage against my opponent. That was always my thinking there. So I've pushed. I would push towards Italian game, e4 openings, and then tactical training to go along with it. There's just not that many opportunities to get trapped. I mean, your opponent can play weird stuff occasionally, and you have to be careful. But in my mind, that's not really as much of a thing in the Italian game as it is in some of the D4 D4 lines. From a positional perspective, I don't know. I guess I would just say it's mostly about tactics. You're trying to basically form an attack on the white king side, or if you're white, you're trying to form an attack on the king side, and you're trying to play bishop to g5 and then pin the knight on f6 with moves like d5. Castling queenside is often better than castling kingside in the Italian, but it gives you an opportunity to really outplay your opponent tactically, which is my sort of strategy for improving out of club level. At some point you are going to have to go. With my strategy, at some point you are going to have to go back and learn the more theoretical side of things. But what I would say to anyone playing at club level is do a ton of tactics. Make sure that if you're in a position where both you and your opponent have to play creatively and out of book, you will win those situations as much as possible, and you'll be able to execute well. And then basically play something where your opponent can't really trick you in the opening, where it's just basically something solid, not particularly frightening. It doesn't have to have any traps or anything too scary in it. Just get to the position where you can play chess and then know how to formulate a strategy and execute that strategy better than your opponent. That's the overarching. If someone asks me what's the overarching concept to improving, that would be the basic strategy that I would suggest. But yeah, the Italian's complex. I mean, all openings are complex, but it focuses on tactics over positional play. And positional play, is something that's also very important in chess. But at club level, the errors are getting made on the tactical side of things. I don't see people who make huge. I mean, I guess I do see people who make huge positional understandings. But you can really differentiate yourself out of class level by having the better tactics and then creating a tactically complicated position. That's more common in an open game. E4, E5 openings. I don't know. I mean, it's. I guess I would just play into Guaco piano, like E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4, bishop C5, and go from there. There are sidelines. One of the things that always frustrated me when I was getting out of class level is that Elephant Gambit was super popular in my and Traxler is an idea. The things that I was the most vulnerable with, and I'm still sort of vulnerable to, are the games where it's like it's basically some type of book trap. So the Elephant Gambit was always super dangerous against me, and is probably still super dangerous against me. But e4, e5, knight f3, d5 can really be tricky against a basically like a white Italian game player under say 1600. That defense will actually get you a great, you'll get great mileage out of that defense. But if you learn the book lines for it and are well prepared, but it's really a crazy situation and very dangerous. Yeah. So Italian game I think is good. Bishop's opening you can try too, but with basically ideas in terms of transposing it into the Vienna or transposing it into the Italian game. But really just play something solid. I think as a I think in general just get to the point where you can play chess, and then get to the point where you can play a chess game that's out of book, and then be very well prepared tactically. That was a strategy that worked for me, and I think that's an effective strategy at club level. Anyways, this is this is the Italian, or this is the Sicilian dragon, defined by this g6 line, moving the bishop to g7, castles, bishop b3, bishop d7, f3, and then castling queenside. And then really it's hard to go wrong attacking as aggressively as possible on the king side. You probably don't want to sacrifice too much material, and usually you don't have to, but you can pretty much play h4, g4, h5, g5 type moves on the king side as much as you want against the Sicilian dragon, and you will not go you will not go wrong with that. That would be my argument in this opening. So yeah, white castles queenside in the dragon I think is better. And the attacks are all very well explored, and I think they're the way to go. Hey Jack Mac, welcome to the stream. And I just wanted to wrap up that opening theory. That I hope that's a good kind of basic sense of what the Sicilian dragon is like. Anyways, on to the next one. Now we're going for Flanky's game. And Flanky was playing white in this game, and I want to take a look at it. Well, thanks for making this your choice, Monsieur Onion. Thank you for joining the stream. But yeah, so Flanky Silver played this game. This is a closed Sicilian, and I'm just gonna play through it quickly because I haven't seen it before. This theory all looks decent. Cool. Okay, and then interesting. All right, so let's take a look at the closed Sicilian. The closed Sicilian is an interesting opening. I've played it. I've tried a few different openings. In my life against the Sicilian. Closed Sicilian is one of them. Closed Sicilian with Grand Prix attack is one of them. 2G3 is one of them, and 2C3 is one of them. They're all pretty interesting. Yeah, so knight c6, and then white has 5 main choices. White's choices are knight f3, which is just going to be a line that's probably going to transpose into a delayed opening. G3, which I like, which allows bishop to g2 and knight to e2. F4, which is the Grand Prix attack. Bishop to b5, which is what's played in this game, and interesting theory that I'm not super, to be honest, I'm not super familiar with. A traditional line, bishop to b5. And then the fifth option is this chameleon variation, knight to g knight to e2. So overall, these are 5 options. All of them, I'm sure, give white a plus here. But let's take a look at bishop to b5. I don't know this as well as some of the other Sicilian lines. I haven't played it. I usually played a Grand Prix attack. But yeah, so on d6, knight f3. F4 transposing into something that sort of looks like the Grand Prix attack, or bishop takes c6. Bishop takes c6 I think is probably the weakest of those options. Looks like it equalizes. The rook on b8 is also just as dangerous for black. So basically white gives up his good squared bishop and his bishop pair in order to have his in order to basically control more of the center, but he loses the B line to this rook. Yeah, Sicilian is a good opening. As white. Yeah, that probably is right. I actually, now that you say it, Hyperion, if you can manage playing the Sicilian, it's a good defense against 1e4. I was thinking, further in the opening, but yeah, if you can just sidestep Italian game entirely with Sicilian, and feel pretty comfortable with the positions that you're getting. You probably don't have to go crazy and do the elephant gambit, but that one actually is pretty dangerous at club level. Under 1600, elephant gambit works great if you learn the theory, which is pretty interesting. Anyways, let's look at this. So, ideas are like, okay, so knight f3, knight f6, castles, d5, rook e1. White's better here. This bishop pair is kind of, not having the bishop pair is kind of a liability. White may want his light squared bishop later, but his central control is very good here, so it ends up being a relatively positive eval. This is the way that the game was actually played. In this game, knight to c6, bishop to c6, b takes c6, and then I don't know. Knight f3 actually isn't one of the preferred openings here. F4 or D3 are actually, in the opening book, but knight F3 doesn't look much worse to me. I think knight F3 is fine. Maybe F4 here is probably best, just because it controls the center. With knight F3, black can respond to E5 and have kind of a strong center. White will play D3 and bishop G5, but basically black will have a really difficult to move center. And chances of playing d5, pawn takes d5, that kind of thing. It's a strong center. It's good. Should be in pretty good shape. So here, knight f3 is played, and then the main, basically, so b6, knight f3. We're back in the opening book, but through a different general transposition. A6 is playable, although I don't really think that's that great. E5 is still playable. This center is going to work well for black. In this game, knight f6 was played. So white's got a few different options. The engine surprisingly is advocating e5. I would be really reluctant to play e5 here. But if you look, if you look at this engine line, everything is predicting equality for white except for e5, and that surprises me. With e5, you're basically neutralizing the center for white. So say pawn takes pawn, knight takes e5, and then something like queen to c7 or e6. Say e6, because that's a straightforward developing move. Queen to c7, because it doesn't hang this. Although I don't think black can take knight to c6 here. I'm pretty sure the knight will get lost. Yeah, the knight gets lost to c7. So e6 actually works. The pawn on c6 isn't actually hanging. So that's an important characteristic of this position. But here, e5 basically neutralizes white's center. He doesn't have any center pawns after this. Black plays queen c7. White plays queen e2, and this knight is well posted, but these two pawns have way more control over the center than white has. White is controlling the center with pieces. Black still has some pawns. E5 can be played later if this simplifies. But overall, I'm sort of surprised by this interest in playing e5 here. To me, that looks like it loses center control, but I guess that this knight gets posted on e5, and that posted knight is worth more than the center pawns. Anyways, I have to think about the way that the computer is evaluating that, because e5 looks like e5 is the type of move that I don't like to play. Basically, giving up center control and neutralizing opportunities with pawns in the center. Anyways, it's still the best, so it's kind of interesting that that's the play. That's the play. It's basically valuing tactics and the posting of the knight on e5 over the control of the center by the pawns, or by white's pawn. Interesting. Anyways, White does not play e5. E5 is considered to be too aggressive. And actually, black gets to play e5 if he wants here. Maybe e5 in general is also supported in terms, basically maybe one of the main values of e5 as well is e5 or pawn takes e5, knight takes e5. I think here, right, the issue with not playing e5 is that black gets to play e5, and now this actually really is a strong pawn structure for black. I think the strength of this pawn structure, the way that these pawns basically hold everything in the center, that's what white is. That's another added benefit of white being the one to play e5 here. Black doesn't get to establish that pawn center. I mean, this pawn center is good, but the black pawn center before was really the dangerous one. And white's basically playing, basically making a premium to avoid. Let's see. Yeah, sure, we could do that, Leaf. We could do that. I mean, the main thing I'm thinking about, in terms of, I'm happy to do that, Leaf, and I do think there's a day where we can do that. But the thing about that is that that's what all the other streamers are doing, and I'm in my mind like, that's covered by somebody else, Leaf. So I'd way rather, save, I'd way rather be very instructionally focused with this one, instead of playing a game like everyone else on Twitch. It's interesting though. It's an interesting thought. We'll do that at some point, Leaf. But that's sort of not the direction that I'm trying to go with the stream in general. Anyways, if the white light squared bishop is in play, So basically, bishop against bishop either on c4, draws e6 in the Sicilian. E6 prevents threats on the f7 square in the Sicilian as well as most games. But yeah, so I'm surprised by e5, but now I can kind of list the reasons of why it's done. And one of them is also to prevent black's b5 or black's e5, which is the best move for black here. Black instead plays d5, and then white is still getting recommended to play e5, but plays rook e1. But I think white's better here. This center feels pretty comfortable. d4 is not really a threat. White will just play knight to e2 and then knight to g3 and bishop to g5. White will be in a pretty good place with that. And then I think everything's good. White has healthy development. Bishop f4 is a good place for this bishop. Preventing rook to b8 from being played. And overall, yeah, I just generally like white's position. Very healthy development. And threats on h6. White is white's looking good here. I think g5 is an interesting move. That looks easily undermined to me. Like, I think h4 is probably the idea. But on g5, they're recommending bishop e5 and then g4. And sure, this is annoying for white, but at the same time, I don't really think this disrupts much of what white was trying to do on this king side. Anyways, very interesting. And here, okay, cool. So now g5 actually does get played, and white is actually better here, which is awesome. And yes, we're entering into the tactic situation. Cool. So here, knight takes g5, pawn takes g5, bishop takes g5, d4, and here, the eval is better for black, but white has a ton of practical compensation. So I think, rook h4 looks really dangerous, or basically rook h4, bishop h6, queen h6, and maybe if white can get both of his rooks attacking the king, white has a lot of practical compensation. It's very dangerous position for black. The rook is attacking. Don't worry about it, Leaf. I mean, honestly, I appreciate you saying that, but the subscriptions are not really what I'm going for. I'm going for people watching and free and chess material becoming free. That's chess instruction becoming free. I want everyone to be able to have a chess lesson. So I appreciate the thought, Leaf, but don't worry about it. It's the thought that counts on this one. for sure. So yeah, so but thank you. Bishop f5, and then bishop takes e7, queen b6, and overall, basically white. I really like white's position. I mean, materially it's about equal. Engine gives it about equal, but this attack is going to cause black some serious problems. So let's keep going. Bishop h6, and yeah, I'm wondering if white could have done something more dangerous. I feel like black's getting too much defense here. Maybe rook e1 here. I would think is probably the best idea. I mean, I'd have to be careful to make sure that there's no issues with rook to h8. Looks like maybe white is just a tempo short or so. This is definitely some. Yeah, the moats are new. Thank Jen for those. I think they're awesome. And if you have any ideas for more, Jen is, I think, looking for some, if I remember. But no pressure either. But I love the tactics emote, and I want to use it as much as I can. It's awesome, and it's super good addition to the stream. But yeah, so g5, knight takes g5 is a very ambitious move. I like it. I think, basically it's going to give white a lot of practical compensation, but a piece is a lot to give up here. I'm wondering if maybe bishop g3, h4 was a better way to play this. The engine is recommending bishop to e5, but unfortunately, I think white just doesn't quite have the strength, to get through to this black king side. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, and then d4, knight e2. But white has a lot of practical compensation, but black is just cleanly better. I mean, he's up a piece. I think the initiative doesn't really get diminished if you play something else here. If you play like bishop to e5. I love the moats are like one of my favorite things of doing this, to be honest. The moats are so cool, and it was so nice of Jen to make them. So they crack me up every time I see them. It's awesome. But yeah, so bishop e5 I think is a better way to play this. Moves like h4 are still very undermining to the king side. I don't think Jen, you are silly. Jen wants extra slots so she can make more emotes. I'll make the deal that if Jen if we get extra slots, then you get to make all the emotes.
Duh.
Deal? Okay. Well, if you want to.
Who
That means
else was going
that means
to
that
make
means you
them?
want to then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who else was gonna?
All right. I mean, I don't know. All right. Well, and anyways, yeah, Jen is really in this for the emotes. Okay, cool. So g5, bishop to e5, and I think white's better. I mean, basically what it's not knight takes g5 is overly aggressive. I think you can get most of the benefits of knight takes g5 by playing something like bishop to h5 and then h4 here. This is still very, destructive to the stability of black's king side. So I like the thinking, and I like the, the desire to come up with a winning attack on black's king side. I think that's awesome, and it's really good idea. But here, I guess I would say bishop to e5, and g4 might be the best move for black. But however it goes, black's king side is going to be really a lot, really vulnerable. So I think there you can basically push for h4 and be comfortable be comfortable knowing that the black king side is going to deteriorate. It's just too big the marginal benefit of giving up the full knight there as opposed to playing h4 is not worth a piece. It's good thinking, it's a good general concept, but actually taking those pawns off the board is not super important here, or super valuable here. You can make the same disruption in the kingside pawn structure with moves like bishop g3 and h4. That's my thinking on that. Yeah, so I'm thinking bishop e5, g4, knight h4, and white's looking fine. This is pretty good. White's got a positive eval. The h6 pawn is vulnerable. I mean, you can reorganize and play bishop to f4. But could black push the c5 pawn? Interesting. Yeah, interesting question. I'll circle back to that 1 second, Hyperion, because I think it's a good question and I'm very interested in thinking about it. And I think that basically, White has this practical comp, but unfortunately, it just doesn't quite. I mean, this is, from a practical perspective, this is great, but with accurate defense, which Black does at the right time, I think Black's just a little bit better here. He's basically a piece up, right? So all he needs to do is sort of end White's attack. I guess it's a piece to 3 pawns by this point. So queen takes c6, and yeah, it actually is pretty unclear who's winning. All right, I'll play through. I'll play through to this in a second. But I just want to go back to Hyperion's point. Is c5 playable for Black? As opposed to g5. So here basically c5 is yeah, good question. So here's I'll give you my Discord homunculus. Here I have a Discord, and a pretty good way is to send games on there. So I'll just give you the link for that. It's also, yeah, I think it's in the video description as well. But it's a full Discord, and it has a game submission section. That's probably the easiest. There's also a few other routes. I mean, there's this excellent. It's another one. If anyone else is here, I'll just give them a shout out, because I think they're great. But there's the chess study group Discord that that has been really great for meeting people, and just they've given me a full a section, like a post games section, that you can also submit games on. I really like that Discord, that chess study group Discord. So I don't know if anyone else is here if that's new to anyone else, but it's a really good place to get some free training and free studying. So definitely highly recommend. But honestly, just any route is fine at the end of the day, Homunculus. I really appreciate you being interested in sending games in, and if you send a game, we'll get back to it really quick. But yeah, thank you very much. So is c5 ever playable here? g5, bishop e5, c5. All right, bye. But yeah, so here, it's a really good question. c5 gets exchanged. Yeah, interesting question. There's definitely a need for Black to get some counterplay here, right? So I like your thinking on that, Hyperion. Basically here, this game has sort of turned into White, attacking Black's king, and basically it's a better situation. White has the initiative. So what are Black's ideas here? Well, bishop e6 is one of them. I guess the idea behind this is, really making sure that you're maintaining the center. Rook b8 would be a very natural move too, but I don't think you can quite do that. I'm wondering about, so on bishop to e5, like knight to g7, or knight to h5 here maybe. Pawn takes, knight takes. This is pretty complicated. But I'm wondering if with the bishop off the board, you can start rook b8 and threat on b2, and then maybe c5 there. So far, in this game, basically, until knight takes g5, White has had very limited vulnerability. Let me see. I think yours is in for tomorrow, Leaf. It's not for today. But yeah, so h6, bishop f4. Yeah, no, sorry. It's for tomorrow, Leaf. Thank you very much for sending it, but it's not for today's stream. Um, so here, this is a full sacrifice, not worth the material. Rook takes, bishop f5, rook h6, and here, I basically think Black has gotten enough material that he's in a good position. White needs to aggressively attack, but it's not super obvious to me what where in the position White should be attacking. Either rook e1 or queen to c6. Queen takes c6 gains more material. Engine is suggesting queen takes c6, and then White's up 4 pawns to a piece, and it's pretty unclear actually who's winning here. This is probably White's best opportunity. You've gotten a lot of practical compensation. I don't really think that this this situation was supposed to. I don't think this was the most accurate defense for Black. White was able to basically exploit practical compensation, a lot of complexity here. Okay, yeah, no problem. Thanks, Leaf. I'm really excited to review your game tomorrow. I have it for tomorrow, and I'm sure that we'll get to it then. Thank you very much. But yeah, so queen d5, and basically here, Black is up more than a pawn, and then with more kind of somewhat inaccurate maneuvering. Queen takes c6 puts White a full piece or 4 pawns to a piece, right? So queen c4 is efficient and disconnects the 2 rooks. That's actually pretty important, because the thing here is on queen takes c6, the rook can play to c8, and then the queen's getting threatened. But instead, if rook e4, queen g5, and then queen c4, then e6 has to be played, or king has to play back, disrupting the 2 rooks, in which case rook to c8 is no longer a defensive resource. So here, the rook has to play to b8, or I think that's the only move, or rook has to play to b8 or e8. But overall, the ability to challenge White on this c file is pretty much diminished. So here, White is definitely in an interesting place with 7 pawns against 3 and down the bishop, but getting closer to equality. King safety is bad for both sides here, and I think both sides are going to try to come up with an attack that allows for them to advance tactically. So this was as close as the game got. Rook takes, and White's down a significant amount of material with a lot of extra pawns. But here was the closest things were. After queen c4, king plays to f8, and queen takes c6. So I just want to go through and take a look. Hey, thank you very much for following, Julio. I'm really happy to have you on the stream. Thank you. But yeah, so in general here, where are the improvements? I thought bishop e5 is fine, not the main line, but fine. And here, the engine finds an improvement. This really wasn't my idea. This is something that I referred to as, I basically referred to the engine, but now I see the rationale for it. E5 is actually excellent here. E5 basically fractures the Black pawn structure, and even though it basically liquidates the White center pawn structure, it prevents Black from basically being able to establish this very powerful pawn structure. These pawns are very difficult to deal with for White. Yeah, good question, Julia. Go to the Discord. There should be a link on the side of this screen that is my Discord, and you can add it in the game submission section on the Discord. Also, realistically, if you post the link here, I'll pick it up too. But there's a lot of different ways, and yeah, no, really excited and looking to get more games, Julia. So please, please send them, and I'm super happy to look at them. Yeah, but the Discord is I think my preferred way at this point. The waiting list is the next games are available at 6:05 on Wednesday. Oh no, sorry, I'm wrong about that. Sorry, 10 a.m. on Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern. So basically, today is Monday, so tomorrow is all filled out, and then 10 a.m. on Wednesday is the next open slot, which is great. People have been sending in a lot of stuff, which is super helpful and makes the stream like that much better. If you send a game now, it'll be in for 10 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday, Julia. Thank you for asking. So e5 and black basically has this very difficult pawn structure. Black doesn't play it. No problem. No, absolutely. No, Julia, look. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it because Jen thinks I spend too much time thinking about this. But, my goal here is really just to give free chess lessons. I think chess lessons should be free because they can be free. There's so many places and so many situations where, it would really be helpful to give as much ability to learn chess as possible. So I'm really happy to help with that. This is a small thing, but I'm a application developer, and I developed an app called the Cop Review app, which allows you to give an objective assessment of the performance of local United States law enforcement. That's the story behind the name is basically what I've done in my professional life, which is develop this app in my small company. So that's the history behind my name. But I like it now, and feel free to take a look at the app as well. It should be linked in the main screen. It's an idea. Anyways, no, thank you very much, Julia. No, I'm working hard. I wouldn't get my fingers are crossed, but I really appreciate the support and the energy of everyone else. And sending material is really helpful, and I'm super happy to get to review games. I learned a lot from this stream as well. It's really helpful to me. I think this is a really underrated way to learn. Just looking at all the games that I get sent to me and looking at all the opening theory for it. I'm certain that's made me a stronger chess player. It's basically there's all these opening lines that when you get stuck playing the same set of openings over and over again over many years, you sort of don't learn the openings that you don't play into. So getting games from other people has actually been excellent in terms of learning the openings where my knowledge was pretty weak. I'm just learning. This is really fun for me to do, and I get a lot out of it. So please send any. This goes for everybody, but please send any of your games, and we're really happy. I'm really happy to have you here. I hope it's helpful because I enjoy it, and it's very helpful for me as well. Cool. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm focused on I'm really focused on the teaching side of things right now. My goal, more than any chess goal, my goal is to make chess lessons completely free for everyone. Everyone should be able to have a chess lesson. Everyone should have an opportunity to become a chess master. That's my goal. In terms of higher title, it would be cool. We'll see what tournaments are available, but that's sort of not where my priority is as it relates to chess. So anyways, we've been stuck on this for a bit, so let's keep rolling. Castles, d5, rook e1, g6, and basically things are going smoothly for white. We're at this part of this curve, I'm okay. The person who will really be cool if you want my opinion is the grandmaster who starts giving chess lessons for free. Once the grandmaster starts giving chess lessons for free, then we've really made progress. So that's the guy who is the actual that's the guy who will really be cool in my opinion. But no, I appreciate the kind words, but it's this is interesting. It's interesting. I get a lot out of this, so I don't feel like But I'm hoping for the GMs to come online and do this because this concept definitely works, and if this can be available to everyone, I really hope that it is. But anyways, that's the real person, the grandmaster that replaces my stream. That's really what I want. Is the grandmaster highest level lessons completely free, and it'll happen. But till then, I'm just hoping to do what I can to be helpful. Um, I mean, I don't know, but the fact of the matter is, it can be, right? I mean, I'm giving a chess lesson, and this format works excellently. So sooner or later, some grandmaster is going to come along and do exactly this, and then everyone will have free chess lessons. It's really great. It'll be a great opportunity for everyone who wants to learn. So, anyways, until that person comes along, this is what we're doing. So, and I think it's an inevitability. So I think we have good things to look forward to from the learning side. Anyways, this game was interesting. Knight takes g5 was overly ambitious. Bishop e5 gets played, and then h4 gets played, and the kingside pawn structure gets disrupted. G4, knight h4, and then basically knight takes e4 is a possibility. This discovery, which is kind of interesting. D takes, and then b takes, and this situation looks pretty liquidated, and white is up. Queen takes h6 here. White's got a lot of practical compensation, even though black may still be okay with good positional play. Anyways, this ends up being good for black after the sacrifice. It was just not it was the correct idea, but not the correct route. Disrupting these kingside pawns is definitely an awesome idea. H4 and things are good. But here instead, white sacrifices and gives up these pawns. It doesn't really help that much that the pawns are gone. It really helps more just that the kingside pawn structure is disrupted. So that was the right idea, but it sort of failed for tactical reasons. Anyways, there's other things that can be done here. Bishop f5 is a little bit weak. Bishop takes e7 can be played and threaten the queen to win material. Thank you very much, Chess Numbers. Thank you very much for joining the stream, and please let me know if you want to send over some material for review. I'm good, with whatever openings or endgames or games you'd like analyzed. But yeah, thank you very much, Chess Numbers. Bishop takes e7, queen b6, and basically, black is fine, but the position's relatively close to equal with white down a piece. This game goes on sort of like this. It always, ends up being pretty complicated. There was an opportunity here with queen takes c6, but I understand, basically every move that isn't played as aggressively as possible. I mean, from a practical perspective, it's just really hard to make to make this move to play queen takes e6 when there's things like bishop e4 or bishop e8 even, threatening this mate in one. The mate in one can be held by the queen, but it's just in very uncomfortable position to play as white. So I understand it. Here, after everything liquidates, it's way better for black. Two rooks can clear off that pawn advantage pretty quickly with the extra bishop support. But yeah, I think it was a well-played game. The pieces that I would look at for takeaways here are, knight takes g5 was overly ambitious. You could basically disrupt the kingside pawn structure much more cheaply with h4, knight h2, and maybe bishop back to f4. So that was the first improvement that I would make. It was the right idea, but just didn't have the enough tactical strength, and also it could be replaced by something that was much less of an expense than the full knight. And here, this position basically ends up playing out pretty well for white. Basically at the closest point, white gets to an almost equal game. Granted, this is a super complicated position to play. White's king safety is bad, black's king safety is bad. This rook is getting threatened. and basically, you're going to need to try to advance the pawns, and you're going to have to do it successfully, or you're going to be down a piece. So overall, super complicated position, but actually much closer than it might appear. It's hard to count pawn. It's hard to evaluate a position like this because it's like, 4 pawns against 4 pawns against a bishop. Like, how do you calculate that in terms of points? Sure. Yeah. No. The bishop move, that is. Yeah. Let me take a look. Let me find it for you. I'm curious about this, Hungry. This bishop, you're referring to this bishop f5 here, right? This bishop f5 is considered an error because of bishop takes e7. Yeah. There's just a tactical response here, so we can go through that line. Bishop takes e7, queen b6, bishop takes f8, rook takes f8, and then something like rook a4. Engine suggesting rook a4. That looks weird. I'd rather play rook h4. Queen takes b2, rook to f1. And overall, white's getting a lot of practical compensation. These bishops will definitely be stronger than the rook in the endgame. But that was the idea. Just the fact that it allows this sort of interesting line where you have 2 bishops for a rook, and yeah, really tactically complicated, exactly. And bishop takes e7, bishop takes f8, rook takes f8. And here, white's in a pretty good place. About equal. Attacks coming on the king side, but overall here, I think white's, white is solid. I don't know. Rook a4 looks so weird to me. I guess the value of rook a4 is that queen takes b2 and then rook f1, and then the a2 pawn isn't hanging, and the a7 pawn is getting threatened. That's probably the logic behind rook to a4, but it does look strange when the king side is so open. Anyways, the improvements here, there were a few tactical ones. This knight takes was not the not the most tactically efficient move. Here, bishop takes e7 would have created a complicated trading situation, but is objectively better for white. And then the final thing here, which is the closest situation that basically the closest the game got after the piece was sacrificed. Just this direct queen c6 move after king f8. After queen takes c6, this g2 pawn is basically is held by this queen, and white has 4 pawns to the bishop. Overall, super complicated, very interesting, yeah, good game for white, I think. Basically this situation could play into a draw for sure. But overall, I think basically the main point of focus was that knight sacrifice was too ambitious. H4 would have been almost as effective in terms of disrupting the black king side. So that's the takeaway from this game. Why don't sacrifice a piece in an attack if you can do it more cheaply with a pawn. That's where I think the logic is there, Flanky. Thank you very much for sending the game, Flanky. Very interesting, and I will keep looking at this. The next game is from Houseline. Thank you for sending the game, Houseline, and here it is. Houseline plays against the Modern. Modern with early a6 gets a good position. I mean, here I think you're 3 pawns up, but I think you've got a big spatial advantage. Wow, Brenbone, thank you very much for I don't even know what that is, to be completely honest, but thank you very much, Belanoff, for the hosting. Thank you. So knight d5, knight takes d5, and exploiting this pin. And things are looking good. And then there's, I think, a blunder there, but overall, interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you very much for sending this game, House Line. I really want to take a good look at this one. Very interesting stuff. So yeah, so basically it's the normal situation where you play a center game against a flank opening. White has a huge space advantage here. This should be pretty like easily recognized. Like these pawns e4 and d4 are really supporting White's basically supporting White's position. White leads in development. White leads in space. Black's play is what it normally is in modern perk type stuff, where there's going to be threats that there's going to basically be threats of undermining moves to catch White overextending in the center. Interesting, cool. Yeah, thank you. That's a nice thing to do. Okay, yeah, I gotta learn this stuff. I gotta learn this stuff better, to be completely honest, Hyperion. But thank you very much for explaining. Yeah, there's some Twitch stuff that I'm gonna have to spend more time on. But I'm hoping to make some progress. Yeah, so Bishop D3, Knight C6, A3. Overall, I think A3 is interesting. I'm not sure that's the most efficient move. The most efficient move is A4, which I also wouldn't play. I'd be developing here. I'd be like playing like F4 or something. Just getting development as quickly as possible. Because Black has played a flank opening and hasn't really challenged your center, you should be able to get some good piece play in and be able to secure good development and good developing squares for yourself. And then the speed at which you develop in a strong way should provide a good lead into a middle game attack or strong middle game advantage. This A3 is good, but I wouldn't have played the best move A4 either. I would have played either Bishop E3 or Bishop F4, developing the dark squared bishop. In terms of opening theory, we're out of it, so yeah, no, for sure, Houseline, and it makes sense. It makes sense. I can say that I wouldn't have played the engine best move here, and I get basically A3 as a defensive move, but I guess I'm sort of I think here basically B4 is not super bad for you. Like Bishop B3, B4. Knight E2, and definitely Black has good space on the queen side. I mean, the queen side's going to become the focus for Black's game. But you can still, this knight isn't that much better on C3 than it is on G3. So like getting your development in and allowing B4 Knight E2 with Knight G3 in mind, you're still going to have well developed pieces in that case. One thing that Black has signaled super early in this game is that Black's king side or Black's queen side here is very open. So I think that Black is never going to be able to develop queen side here. Like it's just not going to work. If Black tries to develop queen side. Here with the idea of Knight E2, Knight G3, I think you can start to think about an attack on the Black king side after he castles. Because he's not going to castle queenside. It's too open. It's just not gonna happen this game. But the kingside attack you can already sort of start to prepare for. So for that reason, I think B4 is allowable, and just getting the quick development is better. But it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. It makes sense. A3 makes sense. I mean, B4 is a move that gets a lot of space for Black, and it makes you move the knight. Which is kind of annoying, or move a knight to a square that you hadn't intended to have it on. But I do think Knight E2, Knight G3 is fine. Interesting. So A3, E6, E5, E5, and White has a huge space advantage here. Basically, this pawn is extended, and the E pawns are neutralized. But overall here, I think you've got a great play. So like Rook E1 pinning to the king is a really good place for that rook to be. Yeah, A4, A5. Definitely undermining the B5 pawn and potentially playing pawn takes b5 with a6 pinned. Yeah, makes sense to me. In general, I think that basically black's not going to be able to advance this queenside very effectively. I guess I would say Aphelion. I do agree with that idea, but I would give it the condition that once black castles, I got you. A4, A5 if black plays B4. Yeah, you could isolate you could use that tactic too. That tactic is always interesting, where basically it's here they're like suggesting like b4. It's really, but if black plays b4 here, there's always the chance. So say on this bishop e3 b4, knight e3 or knight e2, and then black plays like e6 or something. And then if you play a4, you can sometimes get this type of tactic where you can b pawn entirely isolated with a5, and then it becomes pretty vulnerable and overextended. That's definitely a potential tactic there, Aphelion. In terms of interesting idea. In terms of long-term strategy, I think basically the things to go for are it's tactical. Right. Yeah, right. And I think so I think a4 a5 is definitely a move order that can be played and has some value to it. Like it's an idea for sure. Those isolated b pawns can really become a problem for black. But yeah, so anyways, here I'm thinking like knight e7, castles, knight f6, rook e1, and here basically what are the choices for white? He's got this great pressure going on this king in the center. I think ultimately the king's going to castle kingside, because we were talking about how the queen side has basically been so opened up that castling queenside's not really a reasonable possibility. It looks a little less true now, but still probably shouldn't castle on the queen side. You should probably castle on the king side. B4, they're arguing just because this this generates some good space for white. No, exactly. I mean, b4 does shut down any advancements on the queen side. That is definitely true. So you can trade off the knight on c3, fianchetto the bishop on b2, and play knight d4, and maybe even post the knight to f5 at some point. This is actually this is a pretty great move for reasons that are complicated. B4 is great. It shuts down basically any queenside advancements, as Aphelion says, and I agree with. Bishop b2 is actually a really is basically a really strong way to play this. The bishop is a little displaced on this this diagonal, to be honest. The squares that this bishop can go to on this diagonal are e3 and f4. F4 runs into this d6 pawn instantly, so there's nothing really going on there. E3 is kind of pointing at nothing, so that's probably not a good idea. So b4, which actually moves towards developing this bishop to a square where it is definitely productive. This b2 line facing towards this f6 knight, g7 pawn, and rook and h8 rook is a strong place to play that bishop. So that, as well as shutting down any queenside advance, is a good reason to play bishop to b2. Going on from there, h3 is kind of a not a move that improves anything really. I guess I would say my issue with h3 is so h3 with g4 in mind, post castling makes sense. But h3 with knight to g4 in mind does not really make that much sense, because h3, the g4 square is not actually that important right now. It could be important later to get a pawn to it, so the pawn can play g4, g5 post castling and attack the king. But here I think h3 is just sort of a not a bad move, but just sort of an inefficient move. I think either b4, which supports this development on b2 and gives you that fianchettoed bishop. I think that's a little bit stronger than h3 here, just because knight he's basically going to have some. So interesting question. No, there's a discovery here. So here, like let's say b4, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, and then bishop takes bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5, pawn takes b5, queen takes d5, and this knight is pinned. So yeah, really good question. Thank you for asking it, Richard. Yeah, totally a question that needs to be asked, and a key part of this position actually, a really key threat that you need to recognize about the d5 pawn. So black can't take it, which is the most important thing in the rest of the position. But great question, Richard, and I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to explain that a little bit better. So yeah, so I think h3 is kind of a nothing move here. Like it's an idea, and it makes sense in the context of g4, g5, but h3 here I think is they're more productive moves. It's not a bad move, just I think you can find something more productive here. b4 is what the engine is saying. If you want to be a little bit, b4 is the best. I mean, b4 shuts down a5. It shuts down anything black was doing on the queen side. So for that reason, it's the most valuable. But getting the bishop to b2 here is also a valuable aspect of it. Anyways, yeah, no, I mean it's a tactical thing there. It's basically the tactics are important. Black could easily take, and then you would be in the situation where you would have to be ready to play knight takes and then bishop takes b5 with the discovered on the bishop. At club level, class level, definitely tactics are like a huge differentiator between players. So that's why I'm spending way too much time on it, always saying it, but I can say there's a reason why the only emote is the tactics emote. It's because I really think it's valuable in terms of improving your game quickly. It's a really efficient place to place study time. But yeah, so b4 I think is just h3 is not bad. It's just that b4 is more productive. b4 gives you this bishop on this diagonal, and the bishop needs a good outpost, and that's one of them. So yeah, bishop to b2, knight takes, and sorry, this is the sideline. h3 here, g6, bishop f4, and yeah, and well, you played it anyways. So yeah, so great job seeing that that discovered threat. Awesome, nice work, Houseline, because it's not an obvious one at all. So yeah, so that rook e1 pinning that knight, and then the ability to play bishop takes b5. Nicely done on that. So yeah, and then black played it. So basically because Houseline caught that thing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, no. So, but yeah, Houseline. I think that was awesome. That was really good, strong tactical play. Really, what I was hoping you would do, and now you're in great shape going into this. So, anyways, good job. And now White's basically heading into a strong endgame. Still queen takes d7, and basically white will be a pawn and 1.75 up. But yeah, people need the tactics. That's true. I need them as well. It's a huge part of the game. It's one of the things I always say, like, a teacher can't teach you tactics. You really have to just put that work in on yourself, and if you do, you will be in great shape. Every master has put in many, hundreds or thousands of hours on tactics, and that's where it's at. That's the differentiator. That's I think where you will see the best returns, and I think something that every master has done at some point. So that's where I'm gonna strongly suggest everyone, including myself, needs to spend a lot of time. It will really help you, I promise. If you do an hour of tactics a day for a month, you will be significantly better. So anyways, um, yeah. So here I think everything's going well, but unfortunately, a4 hangs the b2 pawn. It's just a small mistake. Um, yeah, no, awesome. I'm really glad that worked for you. It was a great tactic, nicely done, and you catch more and more of those, and you will win more and more games out of it. I mean, basically, without seeing that tactic, like let's just compare the evals on this. Bishop f4 gets played, and then knight takes d5 gets played, and bishop takes b5 gets played. Let's look at any move besides bishop takes b5. Basically, it looks like the engine might have some things going on with c4 that are sort of complicated. But bishop takes b5 wins this pawn directly, and the fact that you see it is really important. Awesome. Thank you, Julio. I'll give you... hey, thank you very much for the follow, Hayes. I appreciate it. Cool. Thank you, Julio. I'll give you a slot tomorrow, Julio, at tomorrow at 6:05. Wait. No, sorry. Okay, Julio. I want to get to all of your games, and I appreciate you sending them all. How about we make one of them at 10 a.m. Eastern on the 5th, and one of them on 6:05 p.m. Eastern on the 5th, and then one of them on May 6th at 10 a.m. Eastern. So basically 3 streams starting on the 5th. So 5th twice, and then one on the 6th. And if anyone else wants to send anything in, it'll all be on the 5th or 6th. But yeah, no, I think all of those, Julio, will be good. Thank you very much for the follow, HSA. Appreciate it, and yeah, thank you very much for both of you guys for joining the stream. So bishop takes b5 is this discovered discovered attack. This is a great tactic to see and awesome. Well, no, thank you, Julia. It's super helpful for you to send material, and I'm always looking for more material. So if anyone wants to send anything, I will get it in, basically in the the 5th or the 6th at this point. But yeah, thank you very much. I'm really excited to looking at your games, Julio, and I really appreciate you joining into the stream today. So anyways here, queen takes b5, queen takes d7, and then a4 is just an unfortunate oversight here. C3 or rook a, rook, I don't know, maybe rook a2 is kind of weird looking, but rook a2 is probably not good because it sort of limits the mobility side to side. But I'm thinking like king takes, and then rook b1. I don't know. There's some maneuvering going on in terms of what becomes the most most valuable. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Shaquille. I appreciate it. Thank you. So here, I don't know. I guess rook b1 could potentially work. These are sort of files that are helpful for white to have. But anyways, a4 swings the game by 3 points. So it's I think this is just an attention thing. Like this b2 is just needs to be defended. C3 probably works as well. Maybe c3 and then rook e2 potentially. Anyways, there's multiple choices here. The engine is going for tactics as it always does. Bishop takes b2, and then like rook a2, and then playing knight to d5, I guess. But yeah. I think that's a good idea, Julio. I'm definitely down for ideas. Sometimes I play people and show the games on here. That's definitely something that I do, Julio. So we'll try to make that part of that. I appreciate this. I appreciate the suggestion, and we'll definitely consider. But yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for sending the games. So rook a2, and then bishop goes maybe to g7. But overall, I think white's in pretty good place. But yeah, so the a4 is just a mistake. But unfortunately, those types of mistakes, they really can adjust the outcome. This gets a lot worse for white. Um, yeah, that's too bad. It's just an attention-related error. I make them way too frequently. I make them all the time, or it feels like I'm making them always. But yeah, a4. The position really gets much worse after bishop takes b2. I don't think this bishop can be allowed to take b2. After bishop takes b2, it's not just the pawn, it's also a disruption of this pawn structure. The pawns before were connected, but now you have two isolated pawns on the queen side. So that is a problem, unfortunately. It's looking good, but yeah, unfortunately, that the game kind of slips away after a4. Yeah, sorry about that. But I don't know you play this great tactic that I like a lot. Bishop takes b5, queen takes d5. Awesome. Definitely a good thing in the game. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, but and that's awesome. I'm really glad you were able to convert to a draw there. And good resourceful defensive play here too. Cool. King g4, nice. G6 was really king g7 was really an error. But yeah, nice. Good tactical defense in this situation. Really great. But yeah, I think you really did get some great tactics in, but I feel like you deserve to win this game, or you deserve a good chance of winning this game. And a 3-point swing with a hung pawn, is a bummer. In terms of improving these, my advice again is just tactics. I think with really strong tactical study, a lot of time spent doing tactics, you get careful as well as you get capable of calculating or recognizing 3-move tactics. You look at the position and you instantly see kind of where the threat is. This bishop on b2. So I don't think you lose track of bishop to b2. I think just overall general tactical study will provide better sight on all of the components of your game. So bishop b2 will become visible, and your eyes will be drawn to it, and then you won't forget about it and play a4. Because I really do think you're up 2 pawns here. Like white deserves a really good kind of endgame type position. This is getting a lot, it's basically getting a lot stronger. But yeah, I mean, it's hard, consistent good play. But at the end of the day, I really think tactical study is the biggest, most efficient way that you can improve. It improves everything. It will help you do better and better efficiencies at various points in the game. I don't think you will still make errors like a4 occasionally, but I'm pretty sure everyone makes errors like a4 occasionally. I definitely do. But I think tactics will help you narrow that down and have more kind of careful games. You played well. In terms of improvements here, I think maybe, I mean, this is sort of a small thing, but I think probably just developing here and not allowing spending your time developing as quickly as possible when your opponent's underdeveloped. That's probably a little better than moving the rook pawn. I wouldn't, it's up to you. As much time as you can. Realistically, it's probably as much time as you can, right? But the study plan that I've been giving to everybody is I would just do 1 hour of tactics a day for a month. There's plenty of places you can do it. You can do it on chess.com has Puzzle Rush and Puzzle Battle. Those are both like quick tactics trainers, really good. Chesstempo.com is free. And what I learned on was a program called CT-ART, which is a really good tactics trainer as well. That's like a standalone program. And Lee Chess Puzzle Storm I hear good things about. I don't really think it matters, to be completely honest. I think you just really need to put the time in somewhere. And if you do, your positions will become much more recognizable to you. I think that's just the case. So that's where I would put that's my study plan. An hour a day for a month. If you can do 2 hours a day for a month, I don't see any downside to that. I don't really think you can overdo it. The only way that you can overdo it is if it stops being fun. Good question. That is a really good question. I think maybe a mix of random tactics and themed. Random tactics, I guess I would say, the value of random tactics is, you get to see all the different possibilities. Themed tactics are also helpful because they really drill in a specific concept. The program that I used, CT-ART, was very helpful in doing like tactics modules. So like you do 100 of this tactic and you do 100 of that tactic and you do 100 of that tactic. Good question. I think maybe mixed is best, but honestly, both of those, on that topic, I think the much more important thing is you actually just set aside the time to do it. If you do it and you do it consistently and you do it as much as possible, really, you will definitely improve. Yeah, repetition's good. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just about setting up your brain to have as good pattern recognition as possible. Like you can look at a position and say really quickly, oh, like there's a mate in 3 here, or like this is the first move that will start a mate in 3, and then you look a little bit closer and you're like, yeah, that's definitely a mate in 3 or whatever. You want to be able to see those things and see them consistently and easily. That's really where you want to be. And if you spend enough time on it, I guarantee you'll get there. It's not rocket scientist. It's not rocket science. It's just like it's weightlifting. You just need to put the time in on it, and you will improve. You will improve quickly. But it's a good question. Sure, yeah, that works. I mean, the much more important thing there, Julio, is it's 2 hours. It's 2 hours spent studying. The consistency and the time spent is much more important than the specifics. Any tactics trainer will work, and that does sound like a good study plan, for sure. But I'm much more convinced that the amount of time spent studying is more important than the specifics there. Yeah. Well, if you play 12 hours a day, that should do it, man. I would just keep studying and you'll be in a good place. Anyways, here I would allow b4. That's one of the takeaways, and then overall, the game continues. I really like this tactic. I like that you saw bishop takes b5 here. I think that's an important thing and should be recognized as a good tactic. And I think you're really solid going into the late middle game, late middle game. This position is good, and then just a small attention error. I think if you can work, if you can basically, the way my method is tactics, but if you can work moves like, a4 out of your system and replace them with moves like c3, just by being a little bit more alert and a little bit better at recognizing the bishop takes b2 threat, you'll see good improvements in your game. It's a move that swings the eval by 3 points is a lot. So yeah, it's just an intention error, house line. Overall, I think you played a great game. You're going into the late middle game up 2 pawns on the eval, and it's just a small error. I think it's a good game. Thank you very much for sending the game in, house line. Really appreciate it. I think you did a great job as well after this getting the draw. But I think basically it's a strong play and good work for you, Houseline. Please keep sending your games. They're very interesting and thanks a lot. Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. All right, so we spent some time on that, but we have 3 more games. Yeah, we have 3 more games lined up, and we'll get through all of these. So let's go. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so White sent this game. I want to go through it. I think this one is from Reddit, but I don't completely remember. So Black plays Alekhine's defense. That's e4, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4. And basically the black plays an early d6 to sort of break up the center. This generally leads to a pretty good position for white, but one where white, in a way similar to the modern opening or the perk opening, can get overextended, and that's really what white needs to look out for. Jen is thank you for doing that. Jen's actually getting dinner with her dad right now, so I'm not so worried about going over tonight. But thank you for keeping that in mind. I'm gonna have to do better of not going over in the future. Usually I have Jen here to steer me away from that, but she's actually getting dinner at her dad's tonight, so I can sort of chill and give these positions as much time as they're interesting for me to look at. So I don't feel the normal rush. C4 and white's pawn structure I think is pretty good. Basically white's position I think is pretty good. A lot of open lines. The move that the engine doesn't like is knight fd2. I think we can correct knight fd2. Let's see if we're still in the opening book. I guess we're not. This I think is a I think basically for white, white can just develop normally here. I understand wanting to move the knight. The knight is getting threatened by the bishop, and the doubling of the f pawns would be annoying. The engine says just go for it. I guess I would say play knight to d4. This doesn't really cause you many issues. But knight d2 actually does cause you issues. That's why I think you can improve on it. Knight d2 hurts the development of your knight a little, although knight c3 is probably the better move anyways. But it really hurts the development of your bishop. You can't move the bishop until the knight moves off of d2. But anyways, basically this knight to d2 is a problem for white. So when looking at a move, I mean, I guess the main thing is I'm glad that you recognize that bishop takes f3, pawn takes f3 leads to a bad pawn structure. If you can keep the pawn structure intact as white, you should. Knight d4 I think is a better way to play this. I'm also looking at knight g5 now actually, because I think that doesn't really hurt white's development any. I don't think the bishop was going to g5, so you want to come up with a move that moves your knight so that it doesn't fracture your pawn structure without hurting your development. And I think knight g5 achieves that goal. Here, king e8, e6 is an idea. E6 will leave black with a terrible pawn structure, like here, like bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, and this is a really ugly pawn structure for black. But here, I think knight d2, in your thought process, when you're looking for a move to move your knight, so you don't get this bad pawn structure, knight d2 should be one that you should be able to cross off your list. I think knight to d2, just for the fact that it hurts the development of this bishop. It decreases the mobility of your other pieces. So for that reason, move like knight g5. If you really want the knight to go to e4, it can. There's just no reason to play a restrictive move like knight to d2 here. So from a fundamental perspective, I understand wanting to move the knight, but move it in such a way that your development isn't harmed. Knight fd2, not the right idea. Here, basically I think white's got a reasonably solid position. This c5 pawn I think also should not be moving any further. This pawn is fine here. It's solid, and it can't easily be attacked. With c5, I think you're just sort of threatening the knight, but the knight's going to move, and then you're going to end up the situation with a worse pawn structure. Here I think basically avoid c5, instead play knight to c3, white's good. White will want to develop safely, and has been slowed down a little bit by knight to d2. But I think the main priority here is just for safe developing moves for white, as is the case in most positions. Black has reasonably good development. White needs to have better development to match him. C5, provides, sort of weakens the C pawn, and I think is makes a threat that black can deal with pretty easily. Now the knight is forced to defend it, and that's just sort of kind of a liability that white didn't really want. So yeah, keep developing here, and I think you should be okay. King e8 looks like that creates some tactical. Oh, so yeah, so bishop b5 here with tactics. This wins a piece. So definitely an improvement. So the options here are. I guess the best option is bishop to d7, in which case you play rook takes, knight takes, bishop takes a4. Yeah, so bishop b5 is a tactic that you played. Okay, cool. Glad you saw bishop to b5. This got you back to peace, and now you're in a way better place. Knight d4 leads to rook d8, pinning this knight to the rook. And then I think, and it's very difficult for black to maintain this defense. Like bishop e3 could work, but this is dangerous. A lot of tactical complexity there. And then awesome, cool. So you play knight takes b4, and then knight c6, and then the rook makes the mistake of taking on c6, and then you get a back rank mate. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, that's a really good good game, and I think it demonstrated the value of tactics here. This is more a positional thing, so I want to focus on it. Knight to d2 is worse because is worse than alternatives because it blocks in your bishop. You want to develop your bishop somewhere along this line, and with knight d2 you slow that bishop down from doing it. So that's takeaway number one. Takeaway number two. I think c5 is also sort of a fundamentally problematic move. C5 basically overextends this pawn. This pawn is better on c4 than it is on c5 because at c5 it has trouble being defended. Black can move and deal with that threat of c5 fairly easily. So with knight b3, the c5 pawn is defended and white is fine. For that, basically. Yeah, I mean, but this, white is overextended here. The pawn was better on c4, defended by the knight, the bishop, and potentially a b3 move, than on, basically isolating it with c5. The knight is fine on a4. So that's the second thinking, just in terms of positional play here. And then basically, bishop b5 was great. Really awesome tactics there. Totally, really good work finding a bishop b5 because that's a necessary move in this situation. And then basically here, white white is up, especially after knight to c7. The eval's at +4, and you're good. So without getting stuck too much on the tactics of this, you found the main one, which is bishop to b5. But the thing that was the thing basically that was a problem for white here was basically the thing that was a problem for white here was this overextension of the c pawn and this blocking of queenside development with the knight retreating to d2. I would focus more on those as a general concept, and then I would also recommend that you go and do the same tactical study that I'm recommending that everybody, including myself, I think would get a lot out of. Yeah, thank you very much, FIFA boy. Have a good week and good luck with your studies. So here, yeah, I mean basically, knight d2 and c5 are the moves that I think are the most easily improved upon from a positional perspective. From a tactical perspective, I think just general tactical training will be very helpful. Like 1 hour a day of like Puzzle Battle or Puzzle Rush or Chess Tempo. But overall, I think this is an interesting game. You played it well, and you had some really good tactical shots. Finding b5 is great. It basically turned you from losing by a little to winning, and you managed to win out of that, which is great. And knight c6 was a great trap. The rook took knight c6, and then you played rook d8 and won. So yeah, awesome. Thank you very much for sending the game, Samsaj, and yeah, thank you. Yeah, really appreciate you contributing material to the stream. I think tactic study is a big focus. I think that will really help you improve quickly. And thank you very much for participating. I really appreciate it. Cool. Two more games. We have one from Stefan and we have one from KHMTF. We will get to this. Stefan is playing black here. Cool. E4, C5, knight F3, D6. Cool. So this is a basically Sicilian defense, pretty standard line. Delayed Alapin, which is defined by knight F3 and then C3. In the regular Alapin, the second move is C3. Knight F6, Bishop E2, Knight C6, and yeah, basically so it's a Sicilian in which White is choosing to open relatively late relative to normal. And then pawn takes d4 is better for maintaining the center. So here, we're in a pretty well-established line. This is still pretty close to regular Sicilian theory. 90% choice, 99% choice is c takes d4. I agree. I think having this pawn structure, guaranteeing this pawn structure, is a good idea for White. On knight takes e4. The response is d5, and then you have some dangerous stuff going on. Queen a5, knight c3, knight takes c3, b takes c3, knight e5, and then knight takes, pawn takes, castles. And basically, you're in a relatively equal position. White doesn't really have much of a center because his center is overextended. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for coming, Richard. Thank you very much for stopping by, and thanks again for setting up that Discord. I really appreciated that. That was great. And feel free to come back anytime, Richard. Very happy to see you. Yeah. So here, d4, knight takes e4, pawn takes e4. Not the main line. So improvements. Basically, yeah, so c takes, keeps the center solid. E4 looks like it's hanging, but White has a good response to this. D5, queen a5, knight c3, pawn takes, and then, basically, White is down a pawn, but Black's pawn structure is pretty bad, and this position is very difficult for Black to actually exploit. White's bishops are better. This bishop has this line. This bishop could also get this line. This rook could get this b file. White has great advantages in piece play that offset his material disadvantage. So yeah, but instead knight takes, which is a little bit unusual. Knight takes e4 is an idea. Knight takes, pawn takes, b4, g6, and Black's in pretty good shape here. Knight takes d4 just doesn't support the center as effectively as pawn takes, and it still involves having the e4 pawn be hung. So with the e4 pawn hanging, and knight takes e4, this is better for Black relative to pawn takes d4. In both cases, the knight takes e4, but here White basically gets no compensation. This pawn structure, unlike the other one, this is a healthy pawn structure. The rook can go to b8. This is really kind of a problem for White. b4 is an attempt to try to expand on the queen side. If White, the best idea for White here is is basically to try to develop quickly. b5 is kind of misplaced. It's a little bit vulnerable, but mostly just not developing White while he's underdeveloped. He needs to develop. Bishop f3, knight f6. Knight f6 is an error. This is just a tactical thing. Knight f6, and then the bishop can take c6, and that's pretty, that's a focus thing. Bishop takes c6 is solid for White. And overall here, Black is playing pretty well. He's got this way better pawn structure. There's not really much going on for White on the queen side, like he can neutralize things. Here, I'm sort of wondering if what black can do in terms of preventing a4, because a4 and b5, and then white actually might have something on the queen side. So I guess I don't know. Knight to d6 is kind of interesting with a discovered threat and a chance to trade off the bishops. Maybe. E5 really strengthens white's center control. It causes a lot of problems because there are spaces in the center that white might use for maneuvering points. It does make this d6 pawn backwards, but I don't think that's actually that important. A4, A4 still looks pretty good, but I guess with E4 and then knight to D7, these pawns are pretty loose and white center is starting to get advanced. If black can get his pawn to D5, or D4, he'll have a connected pass pawn, and that's going to be as strong as the pawns on white's queen side here for sure. So yeah, A takes B5, pawn takes B5, and then if instead of rook E8, queen D7 is played. Oh, okay, awesome. All right, this is what I was wondering about. The actual tactical maneuver to win this pawn, that was an improvement. Queen to D7, white can't defend this B5 pawn at all. So after that queen D7 move, white's basically in trouble. The A4 B5 idea can set up an effective attack, but the A2 pawn alone is definitely not going to beat you. This A2 pawn is just it needs to be a connected passed pawn, or else really there's no chance for white on the queen side. So here, I don't know. Bishop takes f3, knight takes f3. A5 is a good undermining move, and then but the tactical shot that was really important here was queen to d7. Nothing else is nearly as good, and this wins the b5 pawn, which gets close to winning you the game. And with the delayed queen to d7, now a4 is played, and this is actually, this is not winning, but it's something that you're definitely going to have to worry about as black. And it could have been sidestepped. Anyways. Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. Black had a good position for a lot of this game. I want to slow down because I really do think this game offers some good opportunity for some instructional improvements here. I thought black played really pretty well. Knight takes d4 is a misstep for white. This is not as good as pawn takes d4. Knight takes e4 either way, but after knight takes e4, knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, black's way better. This pawn structure is completely fine, and black has no opportunity to and white has no opportunity to really cause much trouble here. Bishop f3, threatens this pin. So definitely, I think this is both attention and tactics. Knight f6 is an error. d5 and black is fine, but this bishop can't be allowed to take c6. White misses it anyways. And now we're in a position we can just sort of develop in a healthy way. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Squash. Thank you very much for joining the stream, and yeah, really appreciate having you here. Thank you. Castles, rook e1, c5, and here your biggest improvement is this tactical move, queen d7. Queen e8 actually also probably does the same thing, but this pin on this b5 pawn, allowing it to be taken, is really gets black close to a win. Once a4 b5 happens, it's it's really a different game. A4 b5 just got out of control. So in terms of takeaways, allowing bishop takes c6, that's just a mistake. Happens to everyone. But this is actually a tactic that would have really saved you. Because the whole problem in this game was a4 b5 got too far advanced and became a way that white could queen. Queen d7 or queen e8 pinned this b5 pawn and shut that down almost immediately. This queen is really in trouble. Basically this queen is really in trouble, and this pawn is done. A queen trade here and a taking of the b5 pawn here will lead to a win for black, or really something very close to a win for black. So that was the move, Queen D7. A tactical thing. With enough tactical training, you will see this move and win this game, basically. White will have very limited chances with just the A pawn. So Queen D7 taking Queen B5, and you're in a good place. So that's the idea. 2 improvements there. I think after that there wasn't really much play. But yeah, definitely watch out for the that bishop pin f3 into c6, and then a better tactical sight pinning that b5 pawn would have won this game for you. Thank you very much for sending this game, Stefan. I really appreciate it. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, tactical vision. The positional stuff all sort of made sense to me. All right, last game of the night. KHMTF, thank you very much for sending this game. And here we are. KHMTF is playing black, and we will have a look. Cool. All right. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5. Okay, this is an opening I know well. The black side of the Ruy Lopez. Good stuff. This is the exchange Ruy Lopez. I'm surprised we haven't spent more time on this in the stream, but a solid line for both sides. There's some interesting tactics that happen here with bishop to G4, and sometimes H3 is a response to H5, or sometimes H5 is a response to H3 post castling. Some very interesting theory here, one that I actually I know pretty well, and it's interesting stuff. Queen D3 looks almost like a slip. I guess it's not necessarily a slip, but I don't think that's a particularly good move. Awesome, cool. Yeah, thank you very much for joining, Jack Mac, and yeah, really appreciate having you here. Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks for observing, and thank you all for contributing your games and ideas. Super helpful, and yeah, have a good night. So yeah, pawn takes c6, d4, pawn takes, queen d3. I've got a feeling you meant to play queen takes d4 here. Seeing as I think you meant to play queen to d4. Now our theory is a little bit tricky, so let's see if we can find some material here. I don't know. I guess there's maybe a discovery, c3 and then pawn takes c3. Rook e1, castles, knight e5. But black is actually in good shape. Black's in good shape after queen to d3, to be honest. But overall, this position is very good for black. It's getting a little bit closer than it should be, I think. Knight d5 is... Yeah, knight d5 is fine. The engine pushing towards capturing one of these files. It's actually saying defend against e6 with rook e8. Rook to d8 is probably pretty intuitive here. But knight d5 makes sense too. Yeah, and then this just sort of became a tactical situation. Overall here, I think basically, yeah, opposite colored, or bishop to knight endgame. Yeah, a lot of craziness here. Okay, cool. E4, E5, exchange Ruy Lopez, queen D3, which is I think a misslip, and bishop C5, knight E7, and now E5, bishop F5. Yeah, good. I mean, you're developing in a healthy way. The queen was supposed to take D4. Now you have your minor pieces all attacking the white side, the queen mostly. Bishop to B5, knight B3, queen takes. This looks good. Black is strong here. I'm wondering if you could have so pawn takes e6 was a big improvement here. Pawn takes e6, and then bishop to c3, and black's in pretty good place. Instead, bishop e6, bishop takes a5, e7 gets the bishop to trade off. But it's still sort of equals. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure if there's too many improvements here. They're basically the engine saying inaccuracies, but this doesn't look too terrible. Nice. Okay. Good tactic for black. And now we have an interesting endgame. So black is definitely. I think the most value is going to come from the endgame here. This is all sort of tactical stuff. Queen d3 takes us, so there's not much opening stuff there either. Let's look at this endgame and really figure out how black wins this. Black is up 6.5 pawns here. So this thing really should be decided. This pawn structure is weak. These are not particularly valuable. And if you can trade them, then if you can trade either of them for one of white's pawns, you're going to be in a good place. So I think what you should probably do is like, yeah, a4 maybe. I guess what you did was fine. This is whoa, although there's a misstep here. Yeah. Okay. Let's focus on the big issues here, because I think you have enough of a margin that many different strategies are going to work for you. This was the real error. C2 allows king to. So I want to spend this position, then I want to close out the stream. But this is actually really interesting. Black needs to support this pawn with his king. And more importantly than that, he needs to use his king to defend the c1 square. There's no way that this pawn is queening without the control of c1. So here, king a6. I don't know, to be completely honest. I don't play Puzzle Rush that much at this point. I mostly play Puzzle Battle. 30 in 5 minutes. I don't know. I mean, I'd guess probably 1700, but that's a really dated guess by me. Yeah, I wish I could give you a better answer than that. I mean, probably like 1700, but I could be wrong about that. These things don't mean exactly the same thing that they did when I was playing Puzzle Battle the most frequently. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question, Sapton. Very happy to answer it. So here, this is the error. C2 is not correct. Black can secure the, basically the extremely important c1 square if he plays king a6 and then king a3 and then king b2 here. So king a3 and then anything and then king b2. And black will be able to push this pawn forward. This is necessary. Black must control the c1 pawn, or that c2 pawn is never going to queen. With c2, white can play king 2 d2 and then get into c1, and black doesn't have the pieces required. He doesn't have anything that can threaten on the dark squares, so that king never has to leave king to c1. This overall is basically here, it's a pretty clear win for black. It's -8. But c2 is an error. You just need to get your king in front of the pawn. This specific case, black doesn't have any ability to knock anything off of the c1 control. So black needs to get control of c1 immediately, and that's the specific reason why the king should get in front of the pawn. The king should get in the front of the pawn in general in pawn endgames, because the king will provide defense for the pawn, like in this case. But this is increased by the fact that there's no dark squared bishop left for black. So basically, if the king doesn't play to a6 and b2, nothing else is going to be able to control c1. So that's the added importance here. So this is a misstep. I mean, basically, moving a pawn forward like this, if it doesn't have, if it's not going to get control of the queening square, is something that helps white. So I think this is a fundamental question. Capture the knight and then take pawn with the king. Yeah, let's go through it. King a6, knight to d2, king to b2, and then you say, okay, so well, what happens if king to like d1? You can just play bishop to f3 and draw the king away on the retake. So basically I'll play through the endgame line. A4, bishop to d3, threatening the knight. If you trade the knight for the bishop at this point, you're toasted because the king controls c1. But basically, the bishop can attack the knight on d2 or d3 or e2, which are the only squares that defend c1. But the most important characteristic of this position is the defense that this king provides the pawn as it moves from c3 to c2 and then to c1. That is the most important, and that's the reason why the king needs to go before the pawn here. Basically, after white gets control of the c1 square, black black may still win, but his winning chances have really gone down because he can't queen the c pawn ever. So here c2. Yeah, I mean, luckily enough, black the king didn't play to c1. If the king plays to c1, the c pawn can't advance any further. But this ended up working out fine, I guess. And it ended up in a draw. But yeah, this is the improvement. Move your king in front of the pawns in a simplified endgame like this. Your king's not going to get attacked by anything. And the control over the queening square. So the same way that controlling these squares is basically the only way that you can win a king and pawn endgame by itself. That general concept still holds true in a position like this. You can't allow king to c1 to be played, and you must get the king to b2 so that it can provide those advancing squares for the pawn. The knight can be annoying, and you might have to play bishop to e3 to threaten to exchange it to get it to move. But at the end of the day, you're gonna the best that white can do without getting his king to c1 is trading his knight for this pawn. And you can prevent c1 by playing king a6 here and not overextending the pawn. Interesting situation. Very cool to take this one to the endgame. And yeah, no, I really appreciate you sending it. This is very interesting stuff. I hope that's helpful. In terms of earlier points in the game, just to close out and give a few more thoughts. This game was weird. Queen. I'm 95% sure that white meant to play queen takes d4 here, instead slipped. And then black was in good shape after that, and then basically winning going into the endgame. And then just converting this endgame is important. I think your strategy was pretty good. Get the king, very active and way up there. And then just this one error here with king a6 here, and then king a3, and then king b2. You control the squares that move this pawn forward, and then you win because the knight has to trade for the pawn because you control all those squares, and you're in good shape. The game is won. Awesome, really cool game. Unusual opening. Queen d3 I think was a slip, but it came to a very interesting endgame, and I hope that basically king protecting the advancing squares and the queening square for that pawn. That's a general concept that I think is very applicable in a lot of games. So I hope that this idea is helpful. Get this king in front of this pawn. Do not over advance the pawn specifically because it allows this king to c1 where it will never leave, and then otherwise because yeah, so c2, and then basically also just because this helps you control these queening squares. King needs to be kept out of c1 because once it's on c1 you can't get it out with any of your pieces. None of them can threaten a dark square. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for coming by. I hope this was helpful. We have another full set of instructions tomorrow. I really just appreciate everyone being here, and I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Please send games if you would like a review or if you have any ideas for openings. And overall, yeah, it's really great. I really appreciate having you on the stream, and hope to see you again soon. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much for being here.